Это чисто экологический продукт. По чайной ложке натощак.
Переверните, в горшочек земелечки насыпьте, и это все.
Я уже на пенсии, мне уже скоро 70 лет. И вот выращиваем птицу, овощи, привозим продавать. Вот так и живем.
Nearly all citizens of Rilsk were endowed with the faculty of buying anything at its cheapest while selling at the dearest. In a span of 1,000 years, this town on the southwestern Russian frontier had seen quite a few reputable tradesmen. But a downtown monument commemorates only one of them, Grigory Shalikov. And he had attained his undying fame in the then mysterious America. Grigory Shalikov had parochial education, money to be spent in moderation, and incredible vitality that had deserved him the passionate personal reference, Blazing Flame. Grigory had turned 20 when he left his hometown for good. His way was destined across the immense territory of Russia. Neither Tobolsk, with its firearms, glass and paper manufacturers, nor Yeniseisk, the fur trade center of the mid-18th century Siberia, had attracted the young entrepreneur. It was Irkutsk where the novice merchant stayed on. The city is more than 2,000 miles away from the Pacific, but that was where adequate labor force as well as provisions could be obtained for an overseas expedition. The city enjoyed a community of successful hunters, fishers, and seafarers. The merchant Yemelyan Yugov had been a chief donator to the construction of the Kharlampievsky church. The sea-based fur trader Ivan Bichevin had acted likewise for the Church of the Sign. The city arms of Irkutsk display a sea otter victoriously carrying a sable in its teeth. For a century, the sea otter, or Kalan fur, had made the most valuable commodity of Siberian entrepreneurs and provided for the basics of the city's economy. Kalan sold well in China, whose emperors had their clothes adorned with its fur. In Kyakhta, the crossroad of the Russian-Chinese trade exchange, Kalan hides used to be bartered for tea chests. Neither the Russian nor the European nobility would fancy doing without Kalan fur. The Russian Empress Catherine the Great wore a magnificent Kalan mantle while she posed for the artist Argunov. Before, the luxurious fur would cover the royal arms. In the heart of Siberia, in Irkutsk, a hunting voyage had been planned. They built a ship that was like a Meccano taken apart to be put together again 2,000 miles away on the Okhotsk seashore. The ship would circle for years around the Alaskan islands before the hold was stocked up with peltry. Kalan was overhunted mercilessly. After all, the welfare, if the survival of the islanders, largely depended on the benevolence of rapacious visitors. The Golikovs, reputable Siberian merchants, offered to Shalikov their partnership. They were determined to end the practice of sporadic, ruthless overseas raids. Instead, They planned to set up a company for a term of 10 years, annex non-sovereign territories, and build a city thereon. For 4,000 years, the indigenous population had learned how to survive in Alaska. They developed skills of food provision, as well as a unique mode of life, and shared among the tribes generous gifts of the nature. To see the Alaskan world as it first appeared to the Russian pioneers, we need to visit the Chamber of Curiosities in St. Petersburg. The north of the American continent, all along the Arctic Ocean shore, has been inhabited by the most cold-resistant race of Eskimo. They used to hunt seal, walrus and whale. While out in the sea, the hunter would wear waterproof clothes. An Eskimo made a perfect hole with his boat. The boat might capsize. Then the hunter would put it back on its bottom with a deft strike of the oar and go on rowing. These clothes belong to the riverside Eskimos, whose habitation has been along the Yukon and Kuskokwim basins. They had fish in abundance, therefore they made their clothes of fish skin. The islands of the Alaskan Bridge, arching from Kamchatka to the mainland Alaska, have been inhabited by Aleuts, sea-based hunters. Dozens of people used to dwell in dugouts, covered on the top with grass mattings. Very light partitions marked sleeping spaces for families. Aleuts used a small device to catapult their harpoons. Thrown by hand, the harpoon would fly not farther than 80 feet. Hurled with an aid of this wooden plate, it would go off as far as 200 feet. The plate effectively increases the amplitude of the moving arm. For hunting bow, the Aleut would put on his water-resistant kit. This one was stitched together of the seal intestines. A mandatory detail of the hunter's attire is this kind of wooden caps, or rather hats caps. We are proud of the world's biggest collection of Aleutian hats and caps. Athabascans make a group of cognate tribes. They hunt big forest beasts like deer, elk, otter, bear. These clothes are made of chamois and embroidered with porcupine quills. The making of such ornamentation was a labor and time-consuming process. In her lifetime, a woman could decorate 10 or 15 or maximum 20 garments. The northwestern Alaska and Alexander Archipelago have been a homeland of Tlingits, fishing being their main economic pursuit. By the early 19th century, the Tlingit community had already been divided between the haves and the have-nots. Here you can see a common person's attire, which consists of a grass-woven mantle and a like hat. Next to it are the chief's clothes. The hat is decorated with a couple of cylindrical extensions. Such hats were an important attribute of the potlatch. As it were, this chief had led 4 potlatch ceremonies. A Tlingit would give away all his fortune to his fellow tribesmen to enhance his social profile. Tlingits were unfamed combatants. Here is a full set of their combat gear. That includes a heavy wooden helmet, an escutcheon, an elkskin clothing, armor plates, and daggers. Tlingits believed that spirits pervaded their natural environment. Therefore, the shaman was a mediator between the world of spirits and the world of people. Europeans first stepped on the Alaskan shore as early as 1732. That was an expedition led by the Russian geodesist Mikhail Gvozdov. It was followed up with a train of Russian fur tradesmen. Not before the 1770s, the northwestern America saw Spanish battleships and eventually British ones. The 18th century brought about a U-turn to the traditional Alaskan lifestyle.
Отец.
Again, отец. Отец.
Отец.
Хорошо.
Father. Праведник.
The Virgin,
Хорошо.
Бог.
the Lord,
Богородица.
Хорошо.
Our Lady,
Воскресение.
Хорошо.
Resurrection,
Владыка.
Молодец.
Владыца.
Владычица.
Владычица. Господи Иисусе Христе, Сыне Божий.
our Lord Jesus Christ, the Son, have mercy on me, the sinner.
Грешного.
Грешного. Хорошо.
Settlers on the discovered territories were needed for solicitation of the Russian sovereignty thereover, as well as for trade development in the Pacific. Shalikov opted for Kodiak Island as the location of his first town. On the 3rd day of August, we anchored at an island. 3 days later, we had 3 visitors whom we did receive with all moves of reverence and friendliness, and in the end had buttered things they needed for a few beasts. On the 9th August, we saw a lot of savages gather on a rocky cliff. They ordered us to sail off, lest we get put to death. On the 12th August, right in the midnight, the savages attacked us. The combat lasted only a quarter hour. At the sunrise, we saw neither alive nor dead, for the former had carried the latter away with them. None of us was killed or wounded, which I put due to our Lord's grace. The Russians took proactive measures against further attacks. They fired their 2-pound cannons to that end. The islanders had to pull in their horns. I did strive for their friendship. They watched my labors plow, plant, and sow. I insisted they eat our food. I did my best to explain that they would stay in the dark unless willing to live in peace and to learn from us. Today, we can't conceive of a peace agreement between 2 communities warranted by the child hostage. For the 18th century's Alaskans, such practice was quite common. So Shalikov had accepted hostage of 20 children of the local nobility. A school was set up for them where they primarily had to learn reading and writing Russian. Later on, some of them traveled with Shalikov to Irkutsk for further education. Of course, settling in the Russian America would mean colonization. Like any colonization, it worked both ways, bringing to the Aborigines positive as well as negative changes. The Aborigines did suffer losses as a result of military encounters, combats, and clashes. They didn't want strangers to hunt on their land and made them procure peltry and so on. But by all odds, the losses were minimal. Shalikov brought his wife and his son with him to Koryak. There, Avdotia, his daughter, was born. Outright, he had forbidden his team lecherous theft. That was a cliché our ancestors used to refer to lechery or infidelity. Moreover, he imposed fines on those who dared offend the locals, either with action or word. The American colonial policy was way different from the Russian one. To rid the Great Plains of the Native Americans, European settlers used to hand out quilts contaminated with smallpox. They also put them up to drinking alcohol until hopeless addiction. The death rate was horrendous. As for the Russian settlers, they were very few. With the Creoles, they had never numbered more than 800 people, and they did need Aborigines for hunting sea beasts. The 2-year experience on Koryak helped Shalikov come up with a development strategy. For one, Russian citizenship for the Northwestern Americans was viewed as a priority. For two, the demarcation of the new Russian borders was to follow up. And finally, some incentives were essential for the Russian families, which would opt for moving away from the metropolis and then start land development. On top of that, he relished the design of a model Russian city with straight, clean streets and with monuments to pioneers and patriots. His name for the would-be city was Slava Rossia. Peter the Great did invest heavily in his secretive Pacific expeditions. Catherine the Great, in spite of commemorating Peter's achievements, lacked his incredible daring. She rejected the Shalikov and Company project. The Winter Palace neither credited the new land development nor granted any privilege to the company that ventured the pioneering. Not even Shalikov's bid for professionals, badly needed in America, got a royal assent. In the end, his merits had been assessed by the imperial order to award him with a sword, exceptional honor to a merchant, and gold medal carrying a miniature of Her Majesty. Shalikov had his dress with awards portrait made and got back to his project. He grew well aware of the need to learn to play politics. Eventually, he found a way with the Count Platon Zubov, the Empress's favorite. His dress portrait depicts him wear the colored fur. Zubov's patronage did bear fruit. A team of locksmith, fitter, smelter, and 10 peasants, all of them being Siberian exiles, was commissioned to travel to America. Nonetheless, Shalikov held the belief that generosity would change those people for the better. Therefore, he instructed his manager on Koryak as follows: "Do your best to get those unmarried of the newcomers wedded to buxom American lasses. Thereto I have sent gifts of wedding clothes and other attributes for brides and grooms, which you shall present at weddings." The Chechenovs, the posterity of Shalikov's comrade-in-arms, to this day have had Alaska as their home. Their older generation know the Russian language and are aware of the cultural traditions.
Когда
Oh Lord, I would worship every day at the Orthodox Christmas time. Each of those 3 days. Fantastic.
Божий нас, от мира и свет разума, небо звезда служащие, звездою чакося. Тебе кланяйтеся солнцу правды, и тебе увидитесь святый восстаку. Господи, слава Тебе.
You know, growing up, my parent, you only know what you heard, because, you know, as a kid you weren't allowed to sit there and you weren't allowed to really ask questions unless they told us or offered it to us. So I don't know anything about Shelikov.
The Russian colonizer Shelikov stills in the distant past. The company's peltry storehouse has been converted to a city museum. The Kalan once brought fabulous profits to ubiquitous entrepreneurs, and now there's one, safe and sound.
Be nice. Be nice.
Hunting Kalan has been banned worldwide, and those people have come close to the shoreline to enjoy the sight of killer whales. Shelikov hadn't had enough lifetime to build Slava Russia. He unpredictably passed away in Irkutsk in the summer of 1795. His body has rested at Znamensky Nunnery in Irkutsk. His bas-relief image on the monument faces the east, where far away across the Pacific lies the northeastern American seashore. His assets provided for setting up the Russian-American company that had managed Alaska before its sale in 1867. Most of the Russian-American estates were gone. But one legacy of the Shelikov project has survived.
We never know whom Saint Herman shall admit. Today, the saint has admitted us. However, many a time before, albeit you would get ready with your boat, and no way. Last year, that big tree fell and blocked the path. But, lo and behold, the Orthodox Ukrainians, guest workers for the local fishery, came to pray, right when their help was so needed, because all the local residents were out fishing. Saint Herman admitted them, and God sent them over here.
For the Alaskans, Saint Herman and Grigory Shelikov do not stand together. Yet it was Shelikov who first went seeking monastic support of an Orthodox mission to Alaska. He met with the monk Herman in Volomsky Monastery.
Ублажаем Тя, преподобнее Отче Германе, ищем святую память Твою, наставничему монаху, и и собеседниче ангелов.
Shalikov solicited a mission, and his company paid the costs of 10 missionaries' voyage to Alaska. They had deep faith in the mission and were prepared to face up hardships. Orthodox campaigners in Petersburg, Moscow, and Irkutsk had collected loads and loads of icons, books, and church service utensils. 100 horses had to be harnessed for transportation. Within the first few years, the missionaries had built a church, baptized 9,000 native islanders, wedded 1,500 couples, and resumed the schools once started by Shalikov. Wrote the Echimandrite Iosif, "Should we be cognizant of the local tongues, our sermons would be of a higher efficacy. Unalaska, Kodiak, Alaska have people of different tongues, which are quite dissimilar. Also, weather often prevents us from visiting them, and other obstructions are everywhere. Way high ridges and hills, and the bay-ridden shoreline." The Shalikov project encompassed ambitious plans for development of a prosperous, sustained region geared up for effective trade with Japan, Korea, China, Philippines, as well as with Spanish and USA tradesmen. Those plans required educated and loyal executives. That was Shalikov's principle. Alas, he was dead. His heirs inherited his capital, but they ignored his plans. Alexander Baranov for long had become the master, if the ruler of Alaska. It was the Kalan fur that the colonists reaped their exorbitant profits of. Without Kalan, running that Russian-American business made no sense. Baranov was aware of his provisional status. He had never planned to stay in Alaska for good. After all, Kalan, the sea otter, couldn't multiply faster than it would fall prey to hunters. Extensive hunting dominated the seashore economy. To put it in rough words, Baranov adhered to the principle, "After us, the deluge." Baranov had refused to appreciate the role of the missionaries, and he didn't care to conceal his dislike. "Especially obnoxious is one Herman, a hermit, worthless scribbler and prater. He pries into our plans and deeds not only in the bright of the day, but also in the dark of the night," was Baranov's vexed comment. Right off there arose a conflict of principles. The Russian supreme law ruled that Baranov be sworn to the new sovereign by the monks in the church. But he wouldn't abide by the law. He reckoned that might weaken his executive power. Thus, Baranov neither took an oath of loyalty to the new Emperor Pavel I, nor did he allow the monks to have the Aborigines sworn. Once Kirill Khlebnikov, a company steward, sent a book as a gift to the saint. Herman replied as follows: "I've mostly seen signs of scorn, sneer, and censure from my country fellows here, and I've learned to believe that those signs match up with my indigence. You have never met me before, and have endued me with such kindness. Amazed and obliged, I really am." The first Orthodox mission soon perished. Some of the missionaries died, others returned to the metropolis to have never come back. Alaska saw only 3 of the missions stay on. They were Herman, his disciple monk Iosif, and the ailing hieromonach Afanasi. they found themselves back in monasticism. But that didn't last long for Herman. He had lived a hermit life on Yalovy Island before a pandemic broke out on Kodiak, and he had to adopt a 2-year-old child. The reason was, had he not done that, the child would have starved to death. In 1820, Sofia Vlasova, a Kodiak Aleut, came over, and she little by little set up a refuge for girls. Apparently, they resided at a distance from Herman's lodge. Then a few more Aleutian families arrived to have formed a small local community. I'm a humble servant to the local people, and also their nurse, Herman used to say. He wore the chains which now lie on the top of his tomb, and strongly adhered to an ascetic lifestyle. That may be the reason why the Lord did hear his prayers. Reverend Herman of Alaska had been sworn as the first Orthodox saint in America. That happened in 1970, 103 years after the sale of Alaska.
А здесь они восторгом относятся к вере православной. Я заметил, что как только отступает от веры...
They have incredible admiration for the Orthodox faith here. You look in their eyes, and you realize they're open, good-hearted people. And I've found out their troubles begin as soon as they've backed out the church. While they remain loyal, they have a community, and that keeps them going. This is true about small settlements with a parish and a priest. Once the church is gone, they end in boozing, drug addiction, and the like. With the church and the priest, they get resurrected, like they're born again, and the life is worth living. No priest, no worth. Back in the 1970s, only 9 Orthodox priests had to deal with dozens of parishes all over the peninsula. A seminary would help a solution of the pressing problem, but there was lack of money, no facility, no instructors. Notwithstanding the challenges, a school named after Saint Herman was open. Its 12 students did sit in classes. American seminaries would send their instructors to Kodiak and pay their salaries. In the long run, it was a special department for the needs of the native Alaskans that assumed financing of the school.
Можно сказать, вас поддержало вообще все вселенское православие.
So the whole world, the universal Orthodoxy supported this school.
They did. And many wonderful things happened here in Kodiak.
Чудесных, вот именно чудес совершилось на Кодиаке.
At one time, there was a Russian ship who came.
Например, был однажды вот русский корабль прибыл в порт Кодиак.
20 men
и 20
wanted to be baptized
попросили покреститься.
before they went back on the ship.
Прежде чем они отплыли обратно.
The seminary's official site runs this creed. We are a seminary for them who know that faith without deeds is dead.
Workers for the church to bring the Russian Orthodox faith to people throughout Alaska. all of the saints who came before us, we try to teach in the same way to the people of Alaska so that we can strengthen the church here in Alaska. Learn more at
Archpriest John Dunlop has his roots in Russia. His mother comes from a priest family. His father had converted to Orthodoxy while a university student.
От всего сердца я хочу вот от нашего храма
From our cathedral,
поднести в вашей семинарии эту икону.
I want to present this icon to the seminary.
Икона святителя Иннокентия Иркутского.
This is the icon of Saint Innocent of Irkutsk.
Она перелетела океан
It crossed the ocean with us
для того, чтобы нас с вами связать, для того, чтобы наше с вами духовное общение
to connect us spiritually
по
and
молитвам,
establish prayerful communication.
по молитвам святителя Иннокентия вот, никогда между нами не разрывалось, чтобы мы были с вами единодушны
And so that we can be connected through the prayers to Saint Innocent of
во
Irkutsk.
Христе Иисусе, о чем просил сам Господь и о чем молятся святые.
And so that we can be one in our Lord Jesus Christ, and this is what all the saints are praying for, and Lord Himself prayed for. У коренных жителей есть такая миссия, которую, может быть, многие
I believe the native Alaskans do have a mission that many people in Russia may fail to conceive of. The Alaskans manifest the very experience of the Orthodoxy, once passed to them by the Russians, and the Russians once learned that experience from the Greeks. To me, all my students stand out as the messengers of that tradition. I feel hurt when I see somebody being blind to this jewel in their crown. And I always recall Saint Herman's comment chanted in his letters. These people are aware of God, even though unaware of Jesus Christ and the New Testament.
My name is Spiridon Ash, and I'm from Nunavut, which is on the mainland. It's not of the Kodiak Island, but it is the Alutiiq community, Sugpiq Alutiiq community. It's a community of about 300 people, and we're all Orthodox, baptized Orthodox. My great-grandfather was a priest in the village. He died, he was a pretty old man. I never seen him. He died before I was born. But he was I hear he was very strict and very serious and dedicated to maintaining the church and teachings in our community. Somewhat of a stronghold of our Sugtstun language, and we're interested in preserving that in the church through translation, some of which has been done already, and we hope to strengthen that, our language and our faith through this process as well. And
Многие наши студенты — это студенты Юпики.
Quite a few of our students are Yupik, Eskimo Yupik, who came from the Kuskokwim River. I attended a conference held there last summer. I'd like to share the feeling I had while listening to Father Philip's sermon. He is the only Yupik, a mitred priest, so he read his sermon in Yupik. Over the time I have worked for the seminary, I have learned some words of faith, like Ogayon, means God. Tankelche means saint. In a nutshell, I can follow the guideline. So said Philip, like God loves us, we must love and revere God. The Yupik culture teaches people to avoid wordiness, and when they choose to speak, they will come back to a certain point again and again. Thus, I am having an impression that Philip does repeat something, and the way he is speaking, you see him live for this. And when I looked about, I felt as if all the people there breathed as one with him. Never ever I've had that feeling before or after.
И я хочу сказать, что я даже такого никогда не испытывала.
I found their hearts free from the plague of idolatry, and I saw them keen and curious. I dared tell them about the Christian faith, and eventually lightened their hearts. Then 40 people were baptized through a ritual permitted in the absence of the priest. We called Grigory Shalikov the last of the pioneers. The first to come were Dezhnev, Atlasov, Buldakov, people from Veliki Ustug, the great city of yore in the Russian north. Their faith was the best gift they had brought over to the discovered lands. Once I put on an exhibition in Moscow, and I exhibited several paintings dedicated to the pioneers. Alan Engstrom, scholar from the USA, came over. A really good guy he is, Alan. He asked, "Fancy being my guest over there?" When I flew in Alaska, I realized the voyage was worth it. Absolutely. I'm a landscapist, and I've never seen such wonderful landscapes before. After all, the art begins when you get driven by the lust to share with others what has inspired awe in you. And people will reminisce about that wondrous land as a Russian legacy.
Дед был офицером в Белой армии.
My grandfather was a White Guard officer. The Zurikovs belonged to the gentry. They owned an estate, just 10-minute walk from the legendary Optina monastery. Not for a wealthy future, but for mere survival. They had to abandon their home. I've always had a passion for Alaska. I've read through all the memoirs, and I worked for an Orthodox church in New York as a candle maker. One day, I got on a bus and set off. I planned a pilgrimage, but have stayed here for 18 years now. Because for me, it's a part of Russia.